I've had a few requests online since posting about the murder game, which is an activity that I do with students in school, about what it actually is and how it actually works. So I thought, I haven't done a practitioner video for quite a while now, so I thought, okay, let's do a video for practitioners about the murder game. In my practice, what I quite like doing is using games to help students to learn different ideas to do with careers or to address different issues and bits and pieces, making things quite interactive. And of course, if we look at DOTS and we look at the self-awareness part of that and the opportunity awareness part of that, those are really crucial things for actually developing ideas to do with careers. So what the murder game does is basically help students to understand the opportunities that are out there in the given sector, but then also an opportunity to discuss them, reflect on them, and think about what that means for them. So, without any further ado, we're going to do a very quick, abbreviated version of the murder game, which is an activity that you can use in one-to-ones, or you can use it in group guidance, or you can even use it for actual group work as well. All you need is a pen, a whiteboard, and a little bit of imagination and a little bit of fun. Okay, so what the murder game is mainly used for is students who are interested in, say, doing something within criminology, or you might have a student who says they're interested in forensics but they're not sure what bit of forensics. That's basically where a lot of this sort of comes from. So I'll run you through it, and then you can use it and adapt it however you wish in your practice. So you start off with basically saying there's been a murder. So I draw the classic kind of murder outline that we see on TV, and then we might have a murder weapon as well, like so. And then of course, if you've got a red pen, you might put some red dots and stuff in here to represent blood. And of course, you have to be a little bit sensitive when you're doing this as well. And then what I do is I say to the students, right, and this is within the context of like you've done all your sort of normal pre-exploration and all the other bits and pieces that you would normally do in terms of contextualizing the work. But we go, right, we're going to go through all the different jobs that happen once there's been a murder. So we'd ask the students, for example, who's the first person that turns up to the crime scene, and we start to unpack it. So for example, they might say lots of different things, but let's say we go with a police constable who will then secure the crime scene, like so. And then we go, who do you call next? And give them a bit of a think, a bit of a talk and that. And then we might have detectives that turn up, and you can then sort of start to unpack other police roles and stuff here with this part of the discussion. And then of course we might have things like forensics. So you might have SOCOs, scene of crime officers, that will turn up, and then we can talk about how some SOCOs are civilians and how some SOCOs are actually police officers. And then we might also sort of talk about pathologists. Now this is quite a useful one, because then with pathology you can also talk about how actually most pathologists don't actually work in this bit, but they work within things like cellular pathology within the NHS and things like that. And you can start to unpack those careers and start to go off in a tangent that direction to unpack NHS careers if you wanted to. So you can kind of start to sort of take these off in different tangents depending on what's happening in the session. We then talk about, okay, where does the murder weapon go back to? Where does the sort of the body go back to? And we can start talking about the investigation that might happen at the morgue and the jobs that were involved there. And then you might also then talk about forensic science labs, and then we sort of talk about forensic scientists, and we can start to unpack that in terms of being forensic scientists, how they're basically scientists in their given fields before they sort of specialise, and start to unpack actually what that might mean and what that might look like. And of course, don't forget the junior roles like the lab techs and similar as well. So we start to unpack that and go, okay, so who needs the evidence that's produced from all of this? And we go, right, take it back to the detective. The detective needs the evidence for their investigation. Now what might happen is they might use that to then catch the person who's done it, and we sort of can sometimes joke, oh, do we just lock people up and throw away the key? And we go, no, of course not. So we start to unpick who else might be involved at this point. So we might talk about those jobs that might do mental health assessments. You might have, for example, a psychiatrist, you might have your forensic psychologist, you might have your mental health nurse, you might have your occupational therapist. All of them are able to do mental health assessments before deciding whether the person they've caught needs to head off through the mental health service or whether it's going to be the legal side of things. So there's mental health assessments, and we can again start to unpick those jobs and what those might look like. Then of course we sort of talk about who's going to actually be sitting with the person when they're being interviewed, and we start to unpick jobs, for example, like solicitors and what's involved there. Now sometimes we can sort of talk about criminal profiling, that sometimes forensic psychologists are pulled in to help the police. The reality of that is that it hardly ever happens. It's not like it is on the TV shows, and it's incredibly rare. So a few years ago I had a chat with someone from the Met who's actually a senior police detective, and they basically said they haven't actually actually got a forensic psychologist that they have employed, and they basically pull in that service when they need it, but it's just so rare. You know, it's not like on the TV basically, but they can be called into support if needed. So you've got your solicitor, there we go. And then from there we talk about what happens. So they've been found guilty, the evidence has pulled it through, what happens next? And then we start to go and sort of start to talk about jobs in court. So of course we then have our barristers, and then we'll talk about barristers for the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS, barristers for the defence. So we start to unpick those and what those jobs are, and we can start to talk about who else might be in court in terms of all the other sort of junior roles. So again, you can sort of start to take those law jobs off in another direction and get in all the other assistant roles and stuff. Now from there, we talk about how these, you know, might have expert witnesses coming in to support, and then from there we go, let's imagine they've been found guilty, and we start to go to prison, like so, and then we can say, who do we find in prisons? You know, what's prison about? Is it just about punishment, or is it about reform? Is it about education? What else is going on there? So there, for example, we might have, of course, the prison guards, but we might also have things like chaplains and similar. But then we'll also sort of talk about that you have teachers and, of course, careers advisors as well. So CXK, who I work for, we've got a prison service where we have careers advisors that go in and do work, and we sort of talk about these other kind of roles that are going on here in terms of what's actually happening. So, you know, we also bring in our forensic psychologist again, and this is where you can have the discussion that many forensic psychologists are actually employed by prisons, and the reason that they can do some of this other work is that actually they spend most of their time here, so on the rehabilitation side. So we can start to unpack that, and of course you can use other online tools and stuff and bits and pieces to find more detail about what's going on with that as a job. And so opening up those conversations, and then from there, of course, you then have the probation service afterwards. We've got our reformed prisoner, and then you might also talk about how social services might be involved if there's children involved as well. And of course you might then have things like careers advisors working alongside, so National Careers Service advisors working alongside DWP and similar if they're looking to get work again. And so suddenly we've got this whole story going on of different jobs going off in different directions, very subtle movement from one job family into another. Then you can also ask the students, which one of these is the criminologist? And that sometimes throws them a little bit. They might go, oh, it's this one, or it's this one, or it's this one. And then, you know, you explain to them that actually a criminologist is anyone who either works in the area of crime or studies it. So then you can start to open up that idea of maybe sort of criminology as an academic. You know, it's quite fun to actually get that last one in there because it kind of opens up a different set of ideas and a different set of jobs by association. So that's basically the murder game, and you can use a bit of humour through it, and I've done it very quickly with you guys, but it's basically posing the questions to the students and getting them, walking them through it, so kind of getting them to think, okay, what's the next role involved? What comes next? Why have we got that? What's involved with those roles? What skills are involved with those roles? What sort of routes might you could you take? Is there more than one here that interests you? Are there some jobs that are similar to others? So, you know, we've got our science jobs here. You know, we've got things like, you know, when you look at your sort of forensic psychologists, careers advisors, chaplains, teachers, you know, there's similarities here with some of these jobs and crossovers. So that's basically the game. So I hope that helps, just to give you an idea of a narrative that you can use with students who are looking at the areas of any basically in there. You know, we've got law, we've got criminology, we've got our forensics and bits and pieces like that. Hopefully that gives you a starting point where you can then go and have other conversations off from that when you're working with your students. Anyway, hope this has been helpful. Let me know in the comment if you would like any more of these sort of practitioner videos. Please just let us know. More than happy to share practice, because talking about practice and sharing practice, that's basically how we all learn and help each other. Have fun and all the best.